My first commander-in-chief, President Ronald Reagan. New movie came out starring Dennis Quaid playing President Ronald Reagan. Went and saw The Late Show last night. That's what we're going to talk a little bit about today on Coffee with Alain. Appreciate everybody joining me. You know, I'm drinking out of a mug that has Walt Disney on it. I don't have a Ronald Reagan mug, which I don't know why I don't. I really should. Maybe need to fix that one of these days. But Ronald Reagan, Walt Disney, both optimists and believed in America. And an interesting fact, Ronald Reagan was at Disneyland in 1955 during the opening. The first day of Disneyland opened, Ronald Reagan was there. Now, Ronald Reagan, besides my first commander-in-chief, was also the only president that I've met personally. Yes, I spent 30 minutes one-on-one with President Reagan back in the early 90s, January 93 to be exact, right before President Clinton became president. I was down in the Die Hard building, the building that they used for the exterior shots of the movie Die Hard. That's where President Reagan's offices were, up in the top. And I got to spend a half an hour talking with him. Remarkable experience. And so obviously, when this movie came out, it was a must-see for me. I enjoyed it. Now, was it 100% factual? Most of the things about Reagan, yes. But they did an interesting thing to tell the story. They used Jon Voight, great actor, as a Russian spy, a very old, elderly Russian spy. And that character is actually in the book, which I have not read the book that this was based on, The Crusader. But from what I understand, they took that character was sort of a mix of different Russians and spies that did go on back then. And it was an interesting way to tell the story, because from the Russian spy's perspective of how the rise of President Reagan helped the fall of the Soviet Union. And that was sort of the theme of this movie. It had a lot of stuff about Reagan's life. However, the theme of the movie was his adamant opposition toward communism and the Soviet Union and the freedom of the America and democracy, and the fight for that against the Soviet Union during that Cold War period. So it had a lot of the highlights that, you know, I could quote. When he was shot, you know, I should have ducked is the first thing he told Nancy. I hope you're all Republicans, he told the doctors. Had the famous quote against the Carter debate. There you go again. Had the famous quote, the Mondale debate. I won't exploit the inexperience and youth of my opponent for political purposes, when they ask him about age. So had a lot of those things. Obviously, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. That was in there. So it had many of the famous lines that we know President Reagan for. It showed, you know, how he was married, Jane, the divorce, then meeting Nancy in that marriage, and how they were so close. You know, it showed, you know, the relationship between Nancy and President Reagan. And it ended with him with the Alzheimer's, you know, and the letter that he wrote to America. So it did a good job, had stuff from his youth, from his lifeguard, from his acting, from his governor to president to the Alzheimer's. So it did encompass his entire life. And I enjoyed it and thought they did a good job. And it was an interesting way to tell the story based, you know, on the perspective of the Cold War and the democracy versus the communism. And so that was really the theme through it. And so I enjoyed it. You know, I want to say good morning to Dixon. Dixon says, do you think Dennis Quaid is a patriot? You? Okay. I like Dennis Quaid. I'm not going to get into the political stuff. I mean, I know there's different things going on with actors and politics. I would rather focus on the movie. I thought he did a good job playing President Reagan. They had him looking very similar to President Reagan. They aged him throughout the movie. They did a good job with that. He did a decent job with the voice. I don't think he quite had the spark and the charisma that Reagan had, but then nobody does. I mean, President Reagan was in his best, so charismatic. He wasn't called the great communicator for nothing. And so that's just, you can't get that unless you have it. And very few, if anyone, have just what President Reagan had. But I thought Dennis Quaid did a very good job portraying the character. The movie was very pro-America, pro-President Reagan. Those that don't like President Reagan or didn't like his politics or whatever, probably not going to go to the movie, not going to enjoy it. Those like me who do like President Reagan, and I like him more for his communication and some of those things than necessary policy, but I did agree with him on policy things too. They're going to like the movie. One thing I really liked is it did show the relationship between him and Tip O'Neill. Now, they disagreed policy-wise. Ronald Reagan, staunch conservative Republican. Tip was a Democrat, liberal. But they put that stuff aside and they were friends. And they never called each other names and all the BS that we see going on in politics today. So I did like that they showed that relationship in the movie. And even the one little line that at 6 o'clock, politics stop and we're just a couple Irishmen going out and having a drink. Because I think we need more of that. I think we need Democrats and Republicans, independents working together more instead of this polarization and fighting and calling each other names. So I wish we had more of Tip and Ron, Irishmen, having a drink, even though they opposed each other on policies at different times. You know, I mean, they even had the scene in the movie where Ronald Reagan joked when Tip came to see him in the hospital after being shot. And I told him not to let Democrats in here, right? And, you know, they had the famous line, I hope you're all Republicans to the doctors. And the doctor replying, today we're all Republicans. I mean, they had all those famous lines, which was just good. I mean, it brought back fond memories for me. One, of reading his biography, which, you know, I have a signed copy upstairs, reading other books about him, and then having that opportunity to meet him. The one thing I wish they had in the movie that they didn't is I wish there would have been a scene with him in his office in the Century Fox building, and they would have had that office like his actual office, because I could have been I've been there, but they didn't have any scenes in that office. The scenes after his presidency were at the ranch, which was fitting. Him, you know, they showed his love of horses in the ranch. But they had a lot of the other characters. You know, they had a couple scenes with Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister, who her and Ronald Reagan were great friends. I remember him talking so fondly about her, you know, as he showed me pictures of him and her on the wall. And so the movie was just reminiscent for me. I just really enjoyed it because it brought back good memories of meeting him, and, you know, some of the stories and one-liners that he had. Such great communicator to connect with people. And Dixon says 2 fat fingers joke question. All right. Thank you, Dixon. Anyway, I enjoyed the movie. If you are a Ronald Reagan fan, go see it. Obviously, you know, that movie is very pro President Reagan, and those that don't like him won't like the movie. That's fine. You can have your opinion. I enjoyed it. I know others that are enjoying it, and I thought they did a really good job. And so I wouldn't mind watching it again when it comes on where we can stream it. Probably watch it with my wife because of the cancer and stuff. She's not going out to things like that. She's really avoiding people, trying to stay healthy with that weakened immune system. So I went by myself last night to see this movie because I did want to see it in a theater, and I'm glad I did. That's my take on the movie. Be sure to sign up for the newsletter. Gonna send that out later tonight. EnjoyLifeSafely.com. Download a free book on staying safe. Keep yourself and your family safe. Get the newsletter with more tips on staying safe, defending yourself, enjoying life, and being exceptional. That's what the newsletter's about. That's what Coffee with Alain's about. Appreciate everybody that joins and listens. Go out, make it a stupendous, spectacular, supercalifragilistic expialidocious Sunday, and I will see you tomorrow.